on Sky News Australia. This is the Rita Panahi Show.
Good evening and welcome to the Rita Panahi Show. Coming up tonight, the Victorian government's attack against property investors intensifies with crippling land tax hikes and a new task force. Another car manufacturer rethinks their electric vehicle strategy. Professor Ian Plimer will join me shortly to discuss that. The Biden administration releases an official message of condolence for the butcher of Tehran. Josh Hammer with the latest lunacy from the US and talking about lefties losing it. These ladies are having a bad day. Let's now bring in senior writer of the Herald Sun, Patrick Carline. Patrick, with the Queensland state election coming up in October, it seems Steven Miles has learned giggling like a schoolgirl won't keep him in power. Tough immigration policies might. And he can read a poll as well as anyone, and immigration is shaping up to be a critical issue at both federal and state level. Steven Miles is backing Peter Dutton's call for a severe cut in migration numbers. This has surprised many, but not me. I think Steven Miles is a savvy politician and he knows what Queenslanders want to hear.
Absolutely. Look, I think if there wasn't a Labor monopoly across the states, you'd hear more state premiers talking like this, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You can't make 2 + 2 = 3, and that's what's happening with this migration policy at the moment, where you're getting a lot more people coming in than houses being built.
But yet they tell us it's not adding to the housing crisis.
Of course it is.
Defies logic.
Of course it is. And look, I think it's important that Peter Dutton's sort of brought this debate to the table. It's such an important debate, isn't it? I mean, it defines who we are and how we live, the number of migrants we have. And there's not enough houses at the moment. It's a very simple equation.
It absolutely is, and the polling on this is clear. We know the overwhelming majority want a cut to migration numbers, and it's the will of the majority has been completely ignored, and by both sides of politics for many years, it must be said. It hasn't just been Labor. Labor's ramped up the numbers to record amounts, but they were pretty high under coalition governments too.
Absolutely, and I think, look, we all suffer for the fact that if somebody suggests, cutting migration, they risk being labelled as racist or anti-multicultural or whatever. It's such an important debate. It's something that we need to be talking about, and we need to be across in a big way. And like you say, I think there is a silent majority who sort of do wonder.
And we're an island nation. That's one of the benefits, is we should be able to have a population policy that we determine. This is our ideal population. This is where we want to be. Yep. And then we set policies to achieve that. Most countries where they've got porous borders can't do that. Now let's go to our home state of Victoria, and the state government's reliance on property taxes is seeing land tax rates soar to unsustainable levels for many families and landlords who are preparing to sell up. Patrick, we can expect to see rents going up higher as the rental pool becomes more and more constrained, because some of the examples we're seeing, and I think we've got some examples from the Herald Sun today. One property owner reveals his family was hit with a $43,000 bill for a little beach shack they've got down in Safety Beach, about an hour and a half from Melbourne, which has been in his wife's family since the 40s. He says since 2021, the land tax on this simple holiday home has increased from around $12,000 to $43,000. So $12,000 to $43,000 in 3 years. It's going to keep going up, and we're going to see more and more homes on the market. And some will say, well, that's a good thing because maybe that will bring down prices. But that hasn't been the experience in Victoria, has it? Because we saw last year there was a report that 1 in 4 landlords in Victoria had sold a property. That did nothing to alleviate the housing shortage.
Look, I mean, it's not fair. It's a dishonest tax to begin with. It's going to push up rents. If you're a landlord, obviously, you've got to cover your own bills. If your bills are higher because of this silly tax, you're going to put it on the renters. So it rips off renters, firstly. It's also very dishonest. They talk about making up, it's a COVID debt sort of levy. It's paying for all the infrastructure projects that most Victorians either don't understand or don't think that we need. I mean, we've got a state debt of it's approaching $180 billion.
Highest in the country.
And, you know, when the Dan Andrews government came in 2014, that debt sat at $20 billion. This is not to repay COVID. This is to repay the mismanagement of the finances of the state. And it's drastically unfair and very anti-aspirational.
Absolutely. And people will say, and I know people around the country say, well, you voted for this, you're Victorians, this is what you want. But what options do we have? It's not like we've got an opposition that is coming up with bold policies. They're pretty much on the same bandwagon. They haven't committed to reducing state taxes or what they're going to do to drastically cut debt. They've got the same crazy energy policies as Labor.
That's true.
So, yeah, stop blaming Victorians. It's victim blaming, is that what that is? And we've also got the Victorian state government warning landlords that they've got a rental task force coming after them in increased numbers. Inspectors and investigators are going to be performing spot checks and looking into renters' complaints with powers to fine and even prosecute landlords in court. I think they're sending a very clear message here to property investors. Invest elsewhere in the country. Perhaps Victoria isn't for you.
Absolutely. Look, I do feel sorry for renters at the moment. I mean, rents are going up. Cost of living is going up. Some of them are getting very desperate in ways that they weren't 2 or 3 years ago. But landlords are facing the same sorts of issues as well. And I think there are lots of laws as it is for egregious landlord behaviour. We certainly don't need sort of inspectors turning up, sort of, knocking on the door saying, we're just checking to see whether you fixed the hot water or whatever, you know.
Because it won't be abused either. I mean,
of course not.
Please. Now to the death of Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi in a helicopter crash yesterday. Patrick, you will not believe this. Just when you think the UN couldn't sink any lower, it has held a moment of silence for this mass murderer and torturer. It's utterly depraved, and I'll be speaking to Josh Hammer later about the Biden administration's reaction. But how can the UN pay a tribute to this monster who's responsible for the murder of so many innocent Iranians?
It's outrageous. It really is. And I mean, the UN, if you look at it, it's morally corrupt at the moment. You look at all these resolutions that are anti-Israel. They make very little mention of Hamas or a massacre or even Jewish hostages. It's very tipped towards this sort of Middle East sort of autocracy, if you like. And as you say, I mean, this man oversaw a political prisoner program that had 5,500 political prisoners executed.
Yeah,
He
after 5-minute trials.
Yes, he suppressed women's rights. There's no freedom of speech. He is horrible.
Absolute monster, absolute Islamist monster. I mean, if you're going to acknowledge his death, you should have a little cocktail party. That's about it. And check out this ridiculous headline from BBC World News. President Ibrahim Raisi's mixed legacy in Iran. Mixed legacy. That's almost as bad as when the Washington Post called Islamic State leader an austere religious scholar. I mean, I don't know what it is with pandering to extremists, but the mainstream media is a culprit. Now, from the Iranian regime to vegan mums in Melbourne, we cover all the big stories here, Patrick, and this one has got folks talking. A vegan mother has requested that her son's footy team stop serving meat sausages at post-game sausage sizzles and replace them with meat-free options. The animal rights activist wrote to South Melbourne District's Auskick saying, I've requested that if sausages must be served, which I believe is not essential at a morning event, we swap out the regular sausages for vegan ones. The club, Patrick, has refused and instead advised her that she could bring her own vegan sausages to be cooked on the barbecue instead, along with the meat ones. Where do you stand on Sausagegate? This is an issue that is tearing apart Melbourne.
I'm pretty sure I stand with about 99% of parents. As a parent, I went to 4 junior football matches on the weekend and a netball game. I think I would have had probably 6 sausages across that time. They are utterly essential for getting through.
Absolutely.
Absolutely essential. So, no, that's going nowhere, that one.
I'm with you. It's one of the treats of having to get up early on a cold, rainy Saturday morning is that
yes.
you get a sausage at least out of it. None of these vegan concoctions that they want. That give it 5 years, I bet you, in inner city Melbourne, there'll be more vegan options.
I'll say it now. I'm never going to eat a vegan sausage.
Never?
Never.
Okay,
no.
bold
No
words
interest,
there
no.
from Patrick Carline. And let's go to the Deputy Opposition Leader, Susan Ley, who has called for broadcasters to support the campaign against domestic violence by ceasing to play Sean Combs, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy's songs following revelations of his abusive and violent behaviour towards his ex-girlfriend. I mean, this is a very easy thing to request, and I'm sure the Teal women will all be backing this, but I think Diddy should be behind bars, perhaps for the rest of his life. So let's make that clear. But I think this is a slippery slope indeed when you want to ban the work of artists who've got questionable behaviour, whether it's music, movies, paintings. There are a lot of great artists whose personal behaviour has been atrocious.
It was interesting driving to work this morning. Michael Jackson was on the radio, but you're never going to hear Gary Glitter or Rolf Harris. I think the market...
Also, their songs are rubbish.
Yes, that's
probably
true.
has something
Yes,
to do
good
with
point. But the market's going to sort it out for itself. We don't need politicians saying there must be a ban on this.
Yeah.
He's very much on the nose. He should be in jail from the looks of it. People will decide for themselves. And I think they've drastically turned off for all the right reasons on this particular artist. We don't need bans.
We don't, but we've got all sorts of great artists whose music is now being played, but we look at their behaviour, some of them marrying girls who are, essentially children at that time.
That's right.
And certainly by modern standards, their behaviour does not pass the pup test, possibly even by the standards back then. So I'm not for just these blanket bans. I think that's just being silly, but you're right. I think the individuals make those choices, and and no one should be surprised that if you've ever looked at P. Diddy's lyrics and what he's promoted openly, that the man was an absolute disgusting piece of work. It's all there in the lyrics. Patrick Carline, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Pleasure.
Let's bring in renowned geologist Professor Ian Plimer. Ian, thanks for joining me in the studio. Once again, let's start with our favourite Cabinet Minister, the hapless Chris Bowen. Here he is proudly standing in front of a big battery. He writes, the North Epping Community Battery is the latest in the 400 community batteries we are rolling out across Australia, step by step, day by day. We are building our renewable energy future. He looks very happy there in front of the battery. But Ian, what exactly do these community batteries achieve? What do we know about their cost, their capacity, their lifespan? That sort of detail I haven't come across yet.
Well, I think they're absolutely fantastic. We used to have a time when we all sat in our houses with reliable and cheap electricity. Now we've got batteries.
Community batteries?
Community batteries, and they last a few minutes.
Oh, great.
So you all go out to the community battery with a candle and you meet fellow power deprivees and you sit around and chat and hopefully you've had a warm meal because there's nothing to cook the meal with when you get home. And these batteries last a few minutes. Now, the one that's meant to run all of South Australia, if all the power goes, lasts 5.5 minutes. That's to keep an industrial state going. So you can imagine a community battery and it's going to last a few minutes. You get to know your neighbours, you make friends with them, and then the lights go out and you can get up to all sorts of mischief. I think it's just fantastic for community bonding.
Well, at a cost, because those few minutes of capacity are not cheap, are they?
Well, you'd have to sell your house soon to be able to pay the electricity and go out and live in a tent in the bush. But it's great for the community.
It's great for the community. I just like the term community battery.
Yes, it's a bit like battery hens. They're all crammed in together.
It's very 1984. Now, let's talk about the viability of electric vehicles. We've got another car manufacturer that seems to be having second thoughts. Senior Toyota boss says the company is still not sure about electrification and that no one knows the future. Well, yeah, we could have told you that. They're going to continue investing in combustion engines and hybrid technologies. EVs are looking less and less attractive. And you do wonder, Ian, without the market interference from governments, just how many Australians would be buying EVs right now?
Well, Toyota's the biggest car maker in the world, and other car makers have seen the light. For example, Mercedes-Benz has said, no, we're giving up on EVs. They're just not economically viable. They can't last the distance. They don't have the resale value, and we're giving it away absolutely and totally. And unless you have subsidised EVs, people are not going to buy them. And to make it worse, once you've got an EV and it's been subsidised, you try to sell it after you've done, say, 100,000 kilometres.
Yeah.
The value has just dropped through the floor. And I quite often do long drives. Last week I drove to Broken Hill in one afternoon, was there for a few hours in the morning and then drove back. Now, I did that 600 kilometres from Adelaide to Broken Hill non-stop. It would have taken me nearly 3 days to do in an EV.
Oh.
And it might have caught a light. If I'd hit a kangaroo, God knows what would have happened. So I think we stick with what we know is tried and proven and reliable, and the biggest car maker in the world cannot possibly get it wrong.
Well, yeah, Mercedes, you mentioned Mercedes, because I think they were going to go EV only, and now they've said, no, well, wait on. we'll just keep on doing combustion engines and hybrids and EVs until we know what the future holds. But you're right about the resale value, because we've got a bunch of EVs who are about to come out of warranty, and you wonder what the value is at that point, where at any minute when you buy it, if the battery fails, some of these EVs, the batteries cost over $40,000.
Well, that's quite right. If you buy an antique car, maybe a car that's 60 or 80 years old, the value goes up. Every other car you have, the value goes down. But if you want it to go down absolutely rapidly and drop through the floor, get yourself an EV, because the cost of replacing the batteries is horrendous. You've only got to touch the underside on the curb, and there are no technicians that know how to repair that. So you scrap the whole car. These cars are wonderful if you want to drive a couple of kilometres a day and go to the shops and feel morally superior, not telling people how slave labour created the cobalt for your car, if you live in the centre of the city. But if you live where you have to travel great distances, such as in rural Australia, or you want to plough a field, an electric vehicle is totally and absolutely useless and a waste of money.
They're ideal for those teal seats, those affluent inner city areas where, you know, the ladies might just be driving a couple of kilometres to lunch and back, and that's ideal. Now, to one of the funniest stories of the month, the UK Telegraph reports eco-friendly brake cables are being eaten by foxes after manufacturers switch from petroleum-based insulation to soy, forcing owners to wrap their cars in tarpaulins. Look at that car wearing a nappy right there. Since 2000, peanut and soy-based oils and waxes have been used on car parts, including gearbox insulation, primer bulbs and diesel injector wires. And the foxes don't mind a taste of this sort of insulation, Ian.
Well, you couldn't make up stories like this.
No,
I mean, it's fabulous. Now, if I were a fox, this would be terrific, because you'd get free tucker, you don't have to go hunting. And the second thing is you get in underneath the car, you keep yourself warm. And the third thing is quite often they have a pan underneath, so you can actually sleep in that pan.
Oh.
So I think these people are rewilding nature by having soya and peanut butter or Vegemite cables on their vehicles. I think it's terrific.
The foxes are enjoying it, that's for sure.
What can possibly go wrong?
Now, an interesting piece in the scientific journal Nature entitled "The Importance of Distinguishing Climate Science from Climate Activism." Ulf Bunkton writes, "I'm concerned by climate scientists becoming climate activists, aren't we all? I see potential conflicts when scholars use information selectively." Oh, yes, this is all very problematic. Yeah. He also writes, "Without self-critique and a diversity of viewpoints, scientists will ultimately harm the credibility of their research and possibly cause a wider public, political and economic backlash." He's going to get attacked for this piece, but he's 100% right. You can't have scientists corrupting science with politics. This is where they lose faith. We saw it with COVID, and we've certainly seen it with climate change.
Well, I used to be an avid reader and subscriber to Nature, and when it turned into an activist journal, I gave up. So I'm surprised that such an article appears in an activist journal. But when a climate scientist can show me about human emissions, then I will believe that they're not activists. And what they've got to show me is half a dozen scientific papers that demonstrate that human emissions drive global warming. They've never done that. So as soon as you talk about humans and climate, you are an activist. So almost by definition, climate science, whatever that is in their language, climate science is an activist venture. So the climate scientists have to show that human emissions drive global warming. They haven't done that. And if they did do that, they then have to show that the natural emissions, which are 97% of the total, don't drive warming. So I think climate science is an activist activity, rather like many areas of sociology, like gender studies. That is certainly not an area of scholarship. It's an area of
Well,
activism.
I would have to point out there'd be very many climate scientists who would disagree with you naturally.
Well, that's because they live off frightening us witless.
Well, I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm just saying there's a lot of climate scientists / activists who might disagree with you. Before you go, I've got to bring to your attention this fantastic piece from The Guardian 20 years ago. We often talk about climate catastrophizing on this show, about these doomsday predictions. And let's go down memory lane to 20 years ago when this article appeared in The Guardian warning climate change over the next 20 years could result in a global catastrophe, costing millions of lives in wars and natural disasters. That was published February 22 in 2004. It's been 20 years, Ian. Another catastrophist warning that came to nothing. But now we've got energy policies being designed because of these predictions. We've had these predictions of doom and gloom for decades, but it seems like now the politicians are taking them extra seriously.
Well, if you read The Guardian, you get what you deserve. And the second thing is that we've had thousands of years of people predicting the end of the world by some catastrophe, and in each case they've been wrong, and if just one of them was right, we wouldn't be here. So I think when you've got to shout out about a catastrophe, then your argument is a very, very weak one. Science is married to evidence, and I have yet to see the evidence that human activities drive a major planetary process called climate change, let alone a catastrophic change.
Professor Plimer, thank you so much for your time this evening. And still to come, lefties losing it. Plus, Josh Hammer joins me for the latest from the US. And goodness me, Joe Biden has disgraced himself comprehensively this week. Welcome back. Now it's time for Lefties Losing It. And where would this segment be if it weren't for bitter, bile-filled lefty loons filming themselves, losing it, and sharing it on social media? Here is such a man, I use the term man loosely, filming himself having an almighty tantrum on the beach because he saw flags.
I'm here enjoying a nice day at the beach with my kids, and I turn around, I got these flags planted here on the beach by these MAGA Listen, this is all America. We know. You didn't storm the beaches to stake out your territory on the beach. This isn't the moon. I get it. This is America. But I'm sick of my flag being represented by white nationalist trash on a goddamn beach. Yourselves.
Imagine being so triggered by the stars and stripes. If it ain't your flag though, mate, if seeing the flag makes you so unhinged, perhaps consider moving to a different country. I'm willing to crowdfund a one-way ticket to Iran for you. Something to think about. We've seen the ladies of The View keen to defend the lefties losing it on college campuses across America. Apparently, these kids are intelligent and ethical crusaders who want to change the world.
Which students are pushing against, which I'm thrilled to see, because I like when students get mad and say, we want a change made.
But how much do these protesters actually know about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Let's find out.
Have you guys chanted from the river to the sea?
Yes.
Okay, which river, which sea?
The Sea of...
So you don't know? No. The answer was the Mediterranean and the Jordan. What does Hamas say their number 1 goal is according to their charter?
They just wanted to free Palestine.
To murder all Jews around the world. How many years did Israel occupy Gaza?
Late 1800s, the entire time.
Since 48.
It was actually under Egyptian control for the first 20 or so years, and then Israel actually left Gaza in 2006.
I'm shocked.
Wait, they left?
Wait, what? They left? Yeah, they did. Surely they can't all be this clueless, can they? Let's see if they can answer Zach Sage's next question. What is a Zionist?
What is the definition of Zionism?
Doesn't that mean you hate Palestinians, right?
Jewish people who think that Judaism is the highest race.
Zionism actually just means that you think Jews are entitled to having their own homeland to protect themselves from another Holocaust. You don't even have to be Jewish. That makes you a Zionist.
Okay.
What does Intifada revolution mean?
I don't know what that means.
But you've chanted it?
Yeah.
It's like a global call to murder Jews.
Wow. Wow.
Did you know you said that?
No.
Would you say it again?
Probably not.
How much have our foreign adversaries donated to American universities in the last decade?
No idea.
I couldn't give you a number on that.
The answer was over 6 billion. How many Gazan refugees have the Arab neighboring countries let in the last few months?
35,000.
The answer was 0.
Look, you asked an education major about...
Students don't seem to know what they stand for. So wouldn't it be great if these expensive colleges actually taught them something?
It would be great if colleges charging $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 tuition would occasionally teach their students something other than how to hate the West. Maybe then we wouldn't have the chickens for KFC phenomenon as exemplified by this next activist.
Can you explain what you're wearing?
Yeah, this is like this. Yeah, this is a Kia. This is
Or what's the meaning behind what it is that you're wearing?
Yeah, so this is a kiefa. It's like kind of worn in a lot of more Middle Eastern cultures, and this one in particular is has a lot of significance in the sort of Palestinian resistance. Words. Wearing this to show solidarity with Palestine and Gaza right now.
What exactly are the Palestinians resisting?
Israel has been essentially colonizing Palestine for the past 70 years or so. And they're resisting colonialism. They are resisting imperialism, and they have been resisting a genocide that has been waged against them that has only intensified over the past 7 months, and they've been resisting this genocide for the past 70 years.
Would you describe yourself as a progressive?
Yeah.
Do you think that Gaza and the Palestinians share your values?
It doesn't really matter what they share my values, because at the end of the day, they are being genocided.
Are you aware that in Gaza they behead or throw LGBT people off of buildings?
No, they do not. Interview's done. Thank you.
All right, just ask the question.
No, they don't. Interview's done. Oh, dear. These people are almost beyond parody, but some comics find a way. Here is Matan Peretz mocking these nincompoops.
People are very sensitive. I don't know, how can you judge on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict if you don't know your own gender? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Thank you. Why are people so upset? It used to be Palestine, now it's Israel. You trans, you should know that. You know what I mean? You just remove the you know what I mean?
Now let's look at some lefties losing it over the commencement speech given by NFL player Harrison Butker. You see, the Chiefs kicker, who is Catholic, gave a commencement speech at a Catholic school saying Catholic things, and that saw this podcaster absolutely lose it.
The kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, who has got to be the most sexist, white supremacist I have ever seen in my life.
Whoa, she just defamed him there wildly. You should probably sue. But they weren't done yet. Won't someone think of Taylor Swift?
Hate him. It's unbelievable that at a time, this last football cycle, where all of these women are attracted to the NFL because of Taylor Swift. Right. And here's this incredibly successful woman, Taylor Swift, that has this amazing work ethic. And then I forget that this type of person exists everywhere. And this is evangelical Christianity. What he said is so disrespectful, to such a large portion of women, and it's so dismissive. I hope that he is canceled to hell and back, and I feel so sorry that his wife has to sleep with him.
Oh, good Lord, that got real weird real quick. And here is another lefty lady losing it over Harrison Butker. She's a former Chiefs cheerleader who seems to think she speaks for all womankind.
You know, we have several things in common. First and foremost, until a few months ago, we were both employed by the Kansas City Chiefs. I cheered you on for 6 years straight. And with that, I would assume we went to the same PR training. Biggest takeaway is you now represent a billion-dollar organization. You are no longer just Harrison Butker. You are now Harrison Butker, who plays for the Kansas City Chiefs. And anything you say or do that doesn't align with that brand, scissoring just like the lesbians you hated in that video, will be grounds for termination.
Oh gosh, she's a little bit annoying, isn't she? And these ladies are going to lose it even more when they find out that Harrison Butker's jerseys have sold out in all the women's sizes. I guess there is only one thing left to do, ladies. Go into the woods and scream it all out. We're going to have more lefties losing it for you in a minute. Joining me now is Newsweek Senior Editor-at-Large, Josh Hammer. Josh, good to see you again. Talking about lefties losing it, let's check in to see how the leader of the free world is doing.
And when I was vice president, things were kind of bad during the pandemic. And what happened was Barack said to me, go to Detroit and help fix it. Well, poor mayor, he spent more time with me than he ever thought he was going to have to. God love you.
Vice President, during the pandemic, Barack said to go to Detroit. What pandemic is he talking about? What's going on, Josh?
I mean, Rita, I think what's going on is fairly obvious, which is that the purported leader of the free world is palpably senile, and he is losing control of both his physical faculties and his mental faculties. I mean, Rita, his staff has had to produce for him a bespoke pair of sneakers. He has to wear a special pair of sneakers, literally just to walk across the White House ellipsis to actually get to Marine One, the presidential helicopter, just to prevent him from tripping even more than he already is. And he's been tripping a lot over the course of his presidency. But however bad his physical decline is, his mental decline is obviously so much worse. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to begin when it comes to the shocking number of gaffes that we've seen over the past few years here from this pathetic excuse of a so-called president of the United States. This is only the latest example here. It's easy for us to joke about Rita, but unfortunately, this has very real ramifications. I mean, dictators all around the world see the decrepit state of the commander-in-chief, and from Pyongyang to Moscow to Beijing and Tehran and everywhere in between, they are just licking their chops looking at this feckless excuse for president.
And it's not just the gaffes, it's not just the cognitive decline. When he does put a sentence together, he's likely to be saying dangerous race-baiting speeches like this one he gave to black students at a college graduation ceremony in recent days.
You missed your high school graduation. You started college just as George Floyd was murdered. And there was a reckoning on race. It's natural to wonder if democracy you hear about actually works for you. What is democracy? If black men are being killed in the street, what is democracy? Betrayal of broken promises still leave black communities behind. What is democracy? You have to be 10 times better than anyone else to get a fair shot. And most of all, what does it mean, as we've heard before, to be a black man who loves his country, even if it doesn't love him back in equal measure?
It is just an incredible speech on so many levels, not just the falsehoods, not just the race baiting, but you just wonder what the motivation behind it is. Why does he want to put that message out there? Why does he want to tell black graduates that they need to be 10 times better than non-blacks to get a fair go, that they're being murdered in the streets?
Yeah, this speech was absolutely positively disgusting. I mean, talk about how a president of the United States should, in theory, try to uphold the best of the American tradition. You know, what Joe Biden should have done before he gave this speech at Morehouse College, which is historically viewed as probably the most prestigious of the HBCUs, the historically black colleges and universities in America, but he probably should have looked to some famous black Americans to see what they had to say about the American experiment, about our Constitution, about our Declaration of Independence. He should have looked at people like Martin Luther King, who spoke wondrously of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. He should have looked at Frederick Douglass back in the 19th century, the great slavery abolitionist, who spoke wonderfully about the Declaration of Independence and how this country was founded, that is, America was founded in a noble and just way for a noble and righteous and just cause. And you know, just to bring some kind of empirical teeth to it, Rita, as well, this notion that black men and women in America in the year 2024 have to work 10 times harder to make it. Are you kidding me? Since the Civil Rights Act of 1964, there has not been de jure under law state racism in America. In fact, the last vestige of actual racism was affirmative action, which the Supreme Court thankfully and mercifully held as unconstitutional last summer. That was against whites, Asians, Christians, and various other groups, not against blacks. So this was a disgusting race-baiting speech, but it speaks volumes about the situation that Democrats find themselves in when it comes to trying to lock up the black vote. They are petrified of young black men in particular, basically the people that were right there in the Morehouse College audience.
They are, and if they think the way to appeal to them and to bring them back in is to indulge in this sort of racial politics, this bigotry of low expectations, they're on the wrong track. But this is all they know, and that's what they're going back to. But I want to speak to you about this shameful episode for the Biden administration. And today, they've sent an official message of condolence to for the Iranian president, Ibrahim Raisi, who died in a helicopter crash yesterday. Really, the White House offering its condolences to the butcher of Tehran, a man who tortured pregnant women, who was responsible for thousands being slaughtered. It beggars belief.
I mean, disgusting, honestly, does not do this justice, Rita. You know, tragically, by the way, it's not just Joe Biden. I mean, NATO, the official NATO spokesperson, also offered her condolences on behalf of NATO. There were many European Union, EU countries that did the same thing. But, you know, for the United States in particular, it really is kind of above and beyond disgusting. I mean, this is a regime, the theocracy, the malocracy in Tehran that's existed since 1979. This is a regime that quite literally chants death to America in the streets. They chant death to America in their legislature there. And, you know, just to kind of underscore how absurd this situation is, it's not just that they want to kill Americans and kill America. They do. The Iranian regime has the blood of hundreds and hundreds of Americans on their hand from their roadside IEDs that exploded during the war in Iraq. They have tried to assassinate Americans all around the world, for that matter. But over the past 48 to 72 hours or so, what we have seen is that a lot of the Iranian people inside of Iran, Rita, have risked their lives to go on social media and celebrate the death of this man that you just described, the so-called butcher of Iran, this man who has terrible, terrible, terrible amounts of copious blood on his hands. And at the same time that the Iranian people who are struggling for basic human dignity and free expression inside their own country, at the same time that they are risking jail time, prosecution, or God forbid, even worse, just to go to social media and to express their joy that the butcher of Tehran is no longer with us. At the same time as that, the president of the United States and the leader of the free world is offering his condolences. How about we just say, we hope for the best for the Iranian people. May your next president offer you something remotely approximating human dignity. Not that the president has that power, it's up to the Ayatollah, but some message along those lines would have been nice. But offering condolences for a terrorist jihadist state, oh my God, never thought I would see it, honestly.
Just if you can't put out a message that hopes for better days for the Iranian people, then just don't do anything. Don't put out a condolence letter. I mean, it is, oh gosh, for someone, as you know, my family fled Iran after the Islamic Revolution and the Islamist takeover of the country. So to have the US president, the Biden administration, put out a message like that, it's just... like I said, it beggars belief. Now let's talk about the illegal immigration crisis in the US. We know there's also a crime issue there. There's been some high-profile cases. I'm surprised this case hasn't got more coverage. An illegal immigrant has been arrested and could face life in prison after allegedly going on a serial raping spree in a van police have described as a rape dungeon on wheels. Here's more from Fox 11 News, and a warning to our viewers, this report may be distressing.
A, quote, rape dungeon on wheels. Oh my God. Described as rigged for rape. Condoms, ropes, bungees, children's toys, multiple cell phones and hard drives, and the mattress, worn, stained, disgusting. And I can say in almost a 20-year career, this is the most disturbing scene I've ever been in. Now, all of that evidence has, of course, been processed. Everything that's in here is what's left. Investigators say the man they call a serial rapist would lock women inside this mobile cage, locked in from the outside, behind this metal partition with no escape.
It's incredible that we keep hearing about these cases with victims who have been left broken. Some have lost their lives. And yet, really, the Biden White House has done nothing concrete to tackle this issue with record numbers flooding in through that southern border. You don't know who they are. You don't know their criminal history. And we shouldn't be surprised that cases like this are emerging.
Yeah, you know, there's no shortage of cases just like this. It's the tragic part. So I live in South Florida, as you know, Rita, and it was in Palm Beach County in Lake Worth, Florida, just 2 or 3 weeks ago that a very similar story unfolded. I don't think that there was a physical van. I mean, God forbid, those images are indeed shocking and cut to the core of our human consciences. But here locally in Florida, there was also an illegal alien in Lake Worth who was also raping women, and they finally caught him after he had done damage to God knows how many souls. And actually, the Palm Beach County, Florida sheriff, to his great credit, was very outspoken about this. And he said, you know what? This person should never have been in this country. And who knows how many people have been damaged by the fact that he was just here. And it's ultimately up to the federal government to prevent them from getting in here. But the Democratic Party in its current manifestation, Rita, has no interest whatsoever in trying to stop the migration inflows of illegal alien immigration, because why would they? Every time that an illegal alien gets to a state due to a ridiculous bit of constitutional misinterpretation by the U.S. Supreme Court, illegal aliens actually count for U.S. Census representation. It's a ridiculous case that the U.S. Supreme Court has to take to rectify at some point. But under current U.S. Supreme Court case law, illegal aliens residing in states like California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey actually add congressional representation there. So you have that, and you have the fact that they're likely future Democratic Party voters. The incentive structure isn't exactly aligned properly for Joe Biden and his fellow Democrats to actually shut down the border. What I greatly fear is that it's probably going to have to wait for the next Republican president, in all likelihood, Donald Trump, possibly come January 2025.
Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time. Still to come, a transgender runner booed at a state championship. Stephanie Bastian joins me next to discuss. Welcome back. Joining me now is Stephanie Bastian, Women's Forum Australia Research Fellow. Let's start with this story out of the US. A transgender high school runner, biological male identifying as female and racing against real females, has been booed as he crossed the finish line in first place in the girls' 400-metre sprint, taking out the Oregon Track and Field State Championships. Have a look. Stephanie, it's a massive slap in the face for those girls who have trained and sacrificed for years to reach that level.
Absolutely, and you can see the response on the field that people are just more and more aware and they're starting to call it out. That's exactly what the booing is. And I have to say, I really appreciate journalists such as yourself calling out your peers when they misrepresent. I saw a tweet last week from the Daily Mail where they said that he was winning, a woman winning the race. No, he was a man cheating. And so I think it's really helpful that we have this being called out in the media and that more and more people are aware of it. It's very frustrating though, because Australia really does need to have some action on this. Women's Forum produced a report, A Fair Playing Field, which highlights the issues of men playing in women's sport. And after the federal election, we sent it to every state and federal MP and every major sporting body. And to date, there's been absolutely nothing, and it's just unacceptable.
It is, and just a reminder to folks of the gap between male and female athletes, particularly in things like the 400 metres. I'm reminded of this stat from a few years ago. The fastest female sprinter in the world is American runner Allyson Felix. This is from Amy Alcon. A woman with more gold medals than Usain Bolt. Her lifetime best for the 400-metre run is 49.26 seconds. Based on 2018 data, nearly 300 high school boys in the US alone could beat it. So the gap between men and women is that wide, and that's why it's so unfair on those girls to train so hard and to have someone who's come in identified as female and beaten them. Now, we know this ideology most impacts girls and women and infringes on their rights. But it's also undeniable, Stephanie, that it's women who are most supportive of the trans agenda. It's not just young women. Listen to this, grandmother.
How old are your granddaughters?
They are 6 and 8.
Would you support them to get hormone blockers to become the other gender?
I would absolutely support them to get hormone blockers. The idea of one of my granddaughters learning that they're going to start having their period if they don't get their hormones blocked, even though they're identifying and portraying as a male, how horrible that would be. So yes, definitely.
If your granddaughter came to you and wanted to get a tattoo, what would you say?
That would be more difficult. I always told my 3 sons the one thing I ask is please don't get tattoos.
Really? Why tattoos?
There's just something so permanent about it.
Permanent?
It's pretty permanent. It's very difficult to get them lasered off or removed.
You don't think it's like permanent to change your gender?
Yeah, old enough to know better. Stephanie, how do we address this issue? Because the polling and just you look at who backs this agenda, and it's far more likely to be women who are going to be disadvantaged by it. How do you make them aware of the full consequences of what they're embracing?
Look, I think there's different reasons why women are more supportive. We are certainly the gentler sex, we care. And I think that we're more easily manipulated by medical professionals who come and tell you that, do you want a dead son or a live daughter? I think there are also issues like, for example, in Victoria, our conversion therapy laws, it is a criminal offence if you don't endorse your child's gender identity. And so that instills fear in the parents. They want to support, they go along with the system. The parents we should be looking at, though, Rita, are the parents of 3-year-old children who are presenting at the gender clinics in Melbourne. I think we should be looking at the influences and how that's come about, because clearly, I mean, a child who is 3 does not even understand the concept of gender. And we know that there are some parents who do project their expectations onto children. In fact, a federal judge found a father had influenced his 2 children to become gender questioning or transgender in the federal court last year, August last year, and restricted access. So this is another serious issue that we need to be, along many, that we need to be addressing.
Oh, absolutely. I think you are so right there. And Blair White, who's a trans woman, has said that you know, show me a 5-year-old transgender child, I'll show you a parent who's making decisions. I think she likened that to a vegan cat. We know who's making the lifestyle choices there. Stephanie Bastian, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rita.
That's it from me. Up next is News Night. I'll see you at 11 tomorrow. Good night.